I am so excited to welcome you to the Candidate Town Hall on the Environment for the 8th Congressional District with candidates Dr. Robbie Goldstein and U.S. Congressman Stephen Lynch. I'm Judy Laren-Jacobs, the Executive Director of the Friends of the Blue Hills. For over 40 years, the Friends have cared for the Blue Hills Reservation so that visitors can enjoy its natural beauty, diverse habitats, and many recreational opportunities. The Blue Hills and all of our open space are impacted by decisions made at all levels of government, and we're pleased to partner with a number of organizations to help you learn more about how these candidates will prioritize the pressing environmental issues that face all of our communities, particularly those communities that have experienced systemic racism for generations, have less access to open space, and have been disproportionately burdened as a result of our current policies and practices. In addition to the Friends, this event is jointly hosted by many organizations, including the Blue Hills Coalition for Climate Action, Clean Water Action, Community Action Works, formerly Toxic Action Center, Environmental League of Massachusetts, Neponset River Watershed Association, Mass Conservation Voters, Mass Sierra Club, Milton for Peace, Quincy Climate Action Network, and Sustainable Milton. Many thanks to the Environmental League of Massachusetts for technologically hosting this webinar. The event is being live streamed on the Environmental League of Massachusetts Facebook page, and all participants will be receiving a copy of the recorded video. All of the organizations sponsoring the Educational Town Hall are nonprofits. None of the organizations support or oppose either of the candidates, and the positions taken by the candidates do not necessarily represent the positions of the sponsoring organizations. For the format, first, Dr. Robbie Goldstein will give a brief introduction and answer questions. Then Representative Stephen Lynch will do the same. Each candidate will answer prepared questions drawn from the questions that registrants submitted previously. Then we will ask questions that you, the viewers, submit by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. And we encourage you to include the name of your town as well. Staff from ELM will be monitoring the questions, so please submit your questions at any time during the event. You can also like or upvote a question that you would like to be asked. We won't be able to ask every question, but we will do our best to ask as many as we can. Now I am thrilled to welcome over 150 viewers from the 8th Congressional District and beyond. And I am extremely grateful to be joined by Dr. Robbie Goldstein. Dr. Goldstein is a physician and graduate of Tufts University, where he earned his bachelor's degree, MD, and PhD in cancer genetics. After he completed his PhD, he joined Massachusetts General Hospital for medical training and eventually joined the faculty. Dr. Goldstein now works as a primary care doctor and an infectious disease specialist. Dr. Goldstein created the hospital's first transgender health program. We are thrilled to welcome Dr. Robbie Goldstein. Dr. Goldstein, do you want to take just like a minute and a half to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you. First, I'll say thank you, Judy, for hosting tonight or this morning, and thank you to all the organizations that came together. I'm excited to be here and to dive into the conversation part of this. But I do just want to take a minute to introduce myself. You all just heard, I am a physician. I'm an infectious disease doctor at Mass General Hospital, and we're all here because I'm running to be the next representative for Congress in the 8th Congressional District. And I want to frame all of my comments with a phrase that I started saying at the beginning of this campaign, which is that I'm in this race to fight for access, equity, and opportunity for every person in every community across this district. You heard from Judy a little bit about my background, my medical training, my time at Mass General, and the work that I do. I just want to dive into that for a second and explain to you why I do that work in the hospital. I do that work because of my parents. I do that work because they taught me how to care for a community in their own dental practice that they had while I was growing up. I do that work because I have the honor and the privilege to care for patients at Mass General who share with me their stories, and they share with me the challenges that they face. And I do this work of this campaign because the challenges that they're facing require a new perspective and a change at the federal level. I hear from patients about the environment. I hear from patients about housing. I hear about transportation. I hear about financial security. I hear about racial injustice. And all of those challenges require some bold action and structural change at the federal level. So I'm excited to be here today and to answer all of the questions that we can get through in the next 30 minutes.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of prepared questions that will be asked by residents in the district and representatives of some of the co-sponsoring organizations. Please, if you could try and keep your answers to 3 minutes, that would be great. We're trying to get through as many as possible. The first question will be asked by Megan Stokes from Community Action Works, formerly Toxic Action Center.
Thanks. Hi, Dr. Goldstein. So COVID-19 has created a public health and economic crisis for our country and our Commonwealth. And the pandemic has really underscored how communities of color and low-income communities are basically suffer disproportionate impacts of pollution and environmental injustice that are often concentrated in their neighborhoods. If you're elected, what are the policies that most excite you, and what policies would you prioritize to address these inequities in our communities?
Thank you, Megan, for the question and for highlighting, I think, an enormous issue that we're all facing. COVID-19, I have to say, lifted up the veil for us, right? These issues of racial injustice, environmental injustice, healthcare injustice existed long before COVID-19, but we're all able to see it now as we see the numbers increasing in communities of color, as we see the numbers increasing in communities impacted by pollution. I think that the number one strategy that we have to take in this case is a strategy that recognizes how all of these different issues overlap, how healthcare, how climate change, how racial injustice are overlapping crises in our country. We've got to focus our efforts on where they all overlap, right in the middle, in a technique that's called multi-solving, right? This idea of let's invest as much as we can in ideas, in practices, and innovations that are gonna have the broadest impact. And I think, we think about what's before the federal government right now. The Green New Deal is a resolution and a concept that really does bring together all of those pieces. It recognizes that climate change is not something to deal with on its own, but yet something we must deal with in the context of financial security, in the context of environmental injustice, racial injustice, transportation. And so, some of the policies that I think about are policies that are going to directly impact communities like Brockton, a community in the 8th Congressional District that has a large community of color. It has the highest air pollution within the district, and it has the highest number of COVID cases within the district. And so how can we invest in Brockton? How can we invest in its economy and make sure that they are a part of the green economy that we're going to build coming out of COVID? How do we invest in their transportation system to make sure that they have sidewalks and bike lanes and the ability to get where they need to go for that green economy? And how do we invest in their healthcare? How do we make sure that their hospitals have the resources they need so that they can manage the cases that are present there and help decrease spread of this virus? But I also think we have to think about other communities. It's not just Brockton in the 8th District. We think about all of the communities along the coastline. There are so many of those in the 8th District. They're also impacted by this overlapping, the overlapping issues of climate change. They are affected by climate gentrification, right? This idea of people moving from the coastline inland and displacing communities of color. And those communities have nowhere to go. And so we've got to invest in housing policy that also addresses this multi-solving idea, that concept of where everything is overlapping. So, I think to sum that up, the one thing I'll say is that this requires that our federal government is very intentional and very explicit in recognizing the overlapping aspects of all of these challenges, and that our federal government and our policies do everything they can to maximize those points where everything overlaps, right? And that investment, so that all of the different organizations, all of the different agencies can work together to have the maximum impact.
Well, thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Dr. Goldstein. Next, we will hear from Carrie Snyder from the Neponset River Watershed Association, who will ask the next question.
Hi, good morning, Dr. Goldstein, and thanks for being here. My question has to do with water resources and climate change. While we need to move quickly to reduce emissions and avoid the worst impacts of climate change, even in the best case scenario, our communities are in for a significant degree of change. Many of the impacts of climate change revolve around water. We're already seeing coastal flooding in Boston, extreme rainfall that overwhelms ancient drainage infrastructure, as happened with a lot of flooding in Norwood recently. Increasing algae blooms and fish kills as the waterways heat up, and more frequent and intense droughts that jeopardize drinking water supplies and wildlife alike. Given the scale of the challenges to our waterways and our failure to adequately fund water, sewer, and drainage infrastructure to even our historic needs, what role should the federal government play in ensuring infrastructure upgrades are undertaken at the scale required? And if there's time, what other policy solutions would you support to ensure we're prepared for the future impacts of climate change?
Good question. Thank you for that. And I want to actually go back and amend what I said in the prior question, because I was talking about a green economy, but we also have to talk about a blue economy, because both our investment in what we're doing on the land and in our waterways is really important as we rebuild out of COVID. I guess I'll start by saying that a lot of what you're talking about and what you're asking about is our ability to adapt. Our ability to adapt to the changing climate and to recognize that we really need to be able to manage the unavoidable harm that climate change is bringing to this planet. The last investment we had in our waterways and in our water infrastructure was about 50 years ago. We have developed incredible technology since then. We have had wonderful innovation in how we can address water, but we haven't implemented that technology and those innovations. We haven't invested in that strategy. And so we have to now, as a federal government, invest in adaptation to our water infrastructure to make sure that our water infrastructure is working to infiltrate and retain water and not collect and detain water. We need to make sure that our water infrastructure recognizes that there's an increased cost and an unaffordability to water in this country right now, and that we have to address that issue as well. But I think ultimately I want to say that adaptation is really important, and we're going to invest in that with new technology. We're going to build a blue and a green economy with that adaptation. But we also have to think about mitigation, and we have to think about reduction, because it's not enough for us to just worry about the adaptation, right? And just worry about managing those unavoidable consequences. It's that we also must avoid the unmanageable. And so, I hopefully will get a chance to talk more about a shift to renewable energy, a shift away from fossil fuels that is making, increasing greenhouse gas emissions and making this planet less safe and less habitable. Hopefully we'll be able to talk about how we can invest in those renewable resources that are gonna lead to a decrease in the overall sea level rise and the changes that we're experiencing in our climate and the weather-related consequences from that. I think the federal government has a really unique opportunity where they can invest in that adaptation. They can invest quickly and heavily in that adaptation using the new technology, but they can also drive forward with the mitigation and the reduction strategies that we need.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Alice Arena from Four River Residents Against the Compressor Station will ask the last prepared question.
Thank you, Dr. Goldstein, for being here. And the question is on fossil fuels. I'm sorry, my camera's not responding. There we go. Thank you. So thank you for being here today. Our dependence on fossil fuels and fracked gas in particular is devastating our climate and our local communities. For example, in Weymouth, a proposed fracked gas compressor station poses a very serious health risk to the local community. And yet construction continues on it despite local opposition and despite them recently losing one of their permits. How would you protect communities from fracked gas infrastructure like that in Weymouth? And further, what policies would you advocate for to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels? And more broadly, what policies do you think are essential for transitioning our economy to fully renewable energy sources?
Amazing question. Thank you. Thank you for that question, Alice. I guess I'm going to say three things about this. So, and I'll dive into these, but the first is that this is something that should never have happened in Weymouth, the compressor station. The second is that we have to continue our fight. And the third is that we have to make whatever outcome is work and likely make the compressor station economically untenable and inviable for those that are running the compressor station. Let me dive into that just to explain what I'm talking about. The first is that this should never have happened, right? This is a compressor station that's a risk to the communities that surround the compressor station. It's a risk to our planet. And it is relying on failed economic incentives of fossil fuels rather than forward-looking innovation into renewable energy. And going back, we should have been pushing harder from the federal level and the state level in government to make sure that this never moved forward with the initial permits that it received. The second is that we have to continue the fight. And, I'm in this fight with folks at FRAX and so many in the community who are fighting against the compressor station. It is important that we continue to center the voices of those in the community and make sure that we are hearing those stories, both in government, but also that those in private industry are hearing those stories and recognizing the devastating complications of this compressor station and how it's going to impact people on the ground. And then I think the third is to how we make this compressor station economically untenable. How do we make it not a viable solution, right? And we do that by moving ourselves as quickly as possible to renewable energy and away from fossil fuels and away from fracked gas, right? We do that with a price on carbon. We do that with a huge investment in renewable energy. We do that by decreasing the limitations that the federal government has placed on wind all across this country, but certainly here in the Northeast. And we help these renewable energy sources move forward in a way that will make it so that the compressor station, if it gets to completion, which I hope it never does, but if it does get to completion, has to sit there and not be used because it's economically not going to be helpful for anyone and nobody's going to want to operate the compressor station. So, I think we can do all of that. I think it takes someone in Washington who's going to fight with urgency. I think it takes a perspective in Washington that says we have to deal with this now and have to control this within the next 5 to 10 years, rather than think about the politics and wait 40 to 50 years. I think it takes centering the voices of people in Weymouth, in Quincy, all along the South Shore, all throughout the 8th District at every step of this process, and making sure that those stories that people are talking about, the real life experience of what it's like in Weymouth and in Quincy, is heard by everybody involved with this compressor station.
Thank you. And thank you for keeping your responses to 3 minutes. That's great. We will have...
You tell a doctor what to do and he does it exactly the way that you tell him to do it. So.
We appreciate that. We'll have more time for questions. So we will now ask questions that were submitted today. As a reminder, to ask a question, click below on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can also like or upvote the question you would like to hear. This question has been asked by numerous people, but please tell us if you support the Green New Deal. And are there any aspects you would improve upon or change?
Yes, I support the Green New Deal. I support the Green New Deal in concept. I support the Green New Deal as it's written. And in particular, I'll say I support the Green New Deal as part of a resolution, which is what it is. It's part of a broad resolution that acknowledges what we were talking about before, that climate change is not something to look at in isolation. Healthcare and transportation and jobs, all of those are part of our ability to address a changing climate and the harmful effects from climate change. And so the Green New Deal is an amazing way for us to frame this conversation. And that's what we need, right? We need framework. And then we've got to get the work done, which means we have to figure out how are we going to bring this investment to various communities, and in particular, Black and Brown communities all across this country, and certainly Black and Brown communities in this district, to make sure that those are the communities that are benefiting from our investment from the Green New Deal. How do we make sure that we make the connections between the different federal agencies that are going to be in charge of our climate response through the Green New Deal, recognizing how interconnected things are, right? We need to make sure that the Department of Health and Human Services and CDC and the NIH are working with the environmental organizations, are working with the Department of Transportation, are working with all of the other agencies at the federal level. And I think the Green New Deal, as it's written right now, gives us some sense of where we're going, but it is the job of the next Congress to pick it up and to write all the individual bills that will come out of the Green New Deal, to really think about what that looks like in practice, what it looks like in terms of congressional oversight to make sure things are happening, and what it looks like by bringing in the voices of all of the communities across this district and across the country to make sure we're actually achieving the benefits that we're hoping for.
Great, thank you. We know that in Massachusetts, we must be investing in affordable, accessible, and green public transportation. Our second question comes from Robert Kearns from Braintree. What are your plans for a clean transportation future?
So when I think about transportation, I like to think of it from the incredible micro level, the very, very local level, to the huge macro level. And hopefully in a short period of time, I can bring you along that journey. I think if we're going to invest in green transportation, it starts by investing in our own neighborhoods, thinking about sidewalk expansion, thinking about bike lanes, thinking of ways that we can decrease the number of cars that are on the road and give people safe and reliable ways of transporting themselves from one place to the next in a very local level. It also means that we have to take the next step up, right? To make sure that we've built the right infrastructure for those people that do need to take a car, but also that we've invested in our public transportation system in the more local level, so that we have an ability for people to take a reliable transportation system from Brockton to Boston, and that experience doesn't take an hour and 40 minutes, but takes a half an hour to 40 minutes as it should, based on the amount of miles that they're actually traveling. And then I think we have to think about this in a much bigger level as well, right? We have relied actually a lot on airplanes and air travel for very short distances that should be done by high-speed train, that should be done by public transportation, not by an airplane. For instance, to get from Boston to New York, we have how many shuttle flights a day that go between those two cities that add to our overall greenhouse gas emissions and are worsening the harmful effects of climate change. If instead we invested in high-speed trains, we'd be able to decrease the number of planes that are flying in and out. We'd be able to decrease the complications and the harmful effects from those planes that are flying in and out of Logan and affecting communities all across this district. So we need to have a comprehensive transportation plan that is going to look from that really high level up in the air with the planes to the very, very local level in the communities to sidewalks and bike lanes. And when we do that broad investment, we will be able to overall decrease the number of cars that are on the road, decrease the impact that has on greenhouse gas emissions, also make our transportation easier and safer for everyone.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from John Kyriakis from Dedham. A major issue for climate change is retrofitting older homes to make them zero emissions. This is quite expensive. What sorts of programs would you advocate for to make this retrofitting affordable to low-income, fixed-income, and elderly residents?
This is one of those pieces that needs to be built out of the Green New Deal. Right? The Green New Deal recognizes that housing and environmental policy are linked. And the way that we actually achieve that link, the way that we fix that problem, is that we use federal investment through HUD, Housing and Urban Development, to make sure that we are going into federally funded, low-income, affordable housing and doing the adaptation work that's necessary. That means that we need to shift funding into HUD, right? Shift funding that is going to be focused on this retrofitting and this adaptation. We need to make sure that that funding is going into affordable housing units that are in the communities that are most affected by climate change. And that adaptation and the retrofitting that's being done is being done with the newest technology we have available. This is actually, I think, while it's an enormous investment, we have a lot of homes across the country that need adaptation and need retrofitting. It is an amazing way for us to move from our current economic crisis related to COVID into the new economy. right? We can put a lot of people to work retrofitting homes. And at that time, we can do some of that multi-solving, right? Try to fix some of the economic crisis we're in, deal with climate change, deal with our housing crisis that exists all across this country, and deal, if we're intentional and explicit about it, deal with the racial injustice that exists within our housing policy and our environmental policy. So I would like to see us use the next 6 months and certainly the next 12 months to really invest in those projects that are going to do some of this adaptation and retrofitting work that we need.
Great, thank you. Our last question comes from Deb Larson Venerable from Milton. Will you support a national carbon tax?
So I will, and I'll say I think that a price on carbon is really the only way for us to shift our current economic incentives. Right now, it is less expensive for us to use fossil fuels than it is for us to use renewable energy sources. And if we are really going to address this crisis with the urgency that we need, if we're really going to deal with climate change, we need a rapid shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources. So I think a price on carbon is the way that we do that. I want to make sure that we are thoughtful about the price on carbon and that we implement it in a way that is truly progressive. We implement it in a way that provides a dividend or a rebate back to those certainly in low-income communities to make sure that we're not worsening the economic burden on people because of this price on carbon. But I think we can do it in a smart way and we can do it in the right way so that we can actually achieve the goal that we're looking for, which is decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions, increasing our dependence on our use of renewable energy.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Goldstein. I very much appreciate your taking the time to talk to us. Do you want to take just about 1.5 minutes to give a closing statement?
Absolutely. I will thank you for hosting and for managing all those questions that were coming in. Nice job with everything. And thank you to all the panelists who asked questions as well. Thank you for everyone who joined to hear my thoughts. I hope that I was able to share with you my perspective on climate change and my understanding that climate change is part of a broader conversation. And it is time for us to make sure we have folks in Washington who are thinking about that broader conversation, who can recognize the intersection of climate change and racial justice, of climate change and economic justice, of climate change and healthcare justice. I think it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a tremendous amount of political energy and inertia to address the harmful effects of the climate, but I am up for that task and I'm up for that job. I believe that this is something that we need to urgently address. We need to address it within the next 5 years. We do not have time to wait. And so it is part of my platform, part of my mission, part of the message of this campaign to go to Washington and fight every single day to address climate change. So I will thank everyone once again for joining, and I will offer to everyone that this is, I always say this is the start of a conversation. I am happy to keep having this conversation. You can continue to talk with us online at Robbie for Change or robbieforchange.com. Please join us, and hopefully we'll get to talk again soon.
Great, thank you again. We really appreciate your coming.
Thank you.
So the congressman has informed us that he's in the middle of a vote series, but is finding a spot outside of the Capitol to join us. While we are waiting for the congressman to arrive.
Hi there.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad you're here. As you get your, and you even have your camera on. So glad. Good time.
Thank you, Judy. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much for making the time. Sounds like it was a little bit tricky.
It is. Actually, so we're in the middle of a vote series, but I'm just outside the Capitol, as you can see, so I'll just run back in when we have next votes. But we have enough time to do this. We probably have a good half hour at least.
Wonderful.
So I have hopefully I'll have time for questions as well. But thank you for doing this, and thank you for being so active on these issues. I really do appreciate it.
Well, we're thrilled that you're able to make it with us. I'll give a brief introduction, and then you can give your own introduction. How's that?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so Congressman Stephen Lynch is the son of an iron worker and a postal clerk. Congressman Lynch was born and raised in the public housing projects of South Boston. Congressman Lynch worked as an iron worker for 17 years and eventually became president of the Iron Workers Union. He was first elected to Congress in 2001 and has been focused on protecting working families and improving U.S. trade policy. We're thrilled to welcome Congressman Lynch. Would you like to take about a minute and a half to introduce yourself?
I would. Thank you, Judy. Thank you for your kind words. Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, here in Washington today, we are suffering the death of a family member, John Lewis. So there's a lot going on, a lot of other things that are occupying our time, but this is an incredibly important moment, I think, for environmental issues as well. You know, John was not just an advocate for social justice, he was also an advocate for economic justice as well, and environmental justice, especially with the health disparities that we've been seeing in some of the minority communities across the country during this pandemic. So very much in line with what John would believe our responsibility to continue our work. You know, that's how he was. He would want us to keep pushing and, as he would say, never give up. This is an important time as well on environmental issues because of what President Trump is doing and the administration is doing. As you know, they're in the midst of a rollback on a lot. They're calling it a modernization, but be clear about this. It's a rollback of the environmental protections that we've had in place since, in some form, since 1970 under Nixon, who established the EPA. But most importantly, some of the things that President Obama did during his 8 years here. So they're rolling that back, and it has an enormous impact across the country, but importantly as well in my district. And you know, one of the sets of rules that he's trying to reverse is whether we at the local level have the ability to call for review of some of the major projects that have an environmental impact in our neighborhoods. And I can, you know, I've been very involved at the West Roxbury lateral project, which unfortunately we were not able to stop, but that goes through an active blasting zone. And I've been very active with my coalition, the Frax group in Alice Arena down in Weymouth, and Becky Haw and the other activists down there. And it's really become a not just a Weymouth issue, but a Massachusetts issue, and in some respects a national issue on our effort to try to push back on that compressor station. I would say we have them sort of on the ropes, but you know, we've pushed back with some of the legal action, and we've got favorable decisions. But I think that the Trump administration with this EPA rollback could Bigfoot us and actually make it much more difficult for us to even get a hearing. During the compressor station fight, you know, I was able to initially get FERC to come in. So let me back up a little bit. Because of the environmental problems that we've been having in my district, I actually used my seniority to get on the transportation committee, to get on the aviation subcommittee, which we're having an awful time. Well, we were until the flight stopped with the FAA, and then I got on the pipeline and hazardous materials subcommittee. That's how I got FERC to come in, and then I got the PHMSA to come in, the Pipelines and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And now we're going to transition to some of the prepared questions. The first question will be asked by Mamadou Chamo, junior at Brockton High School. And if you could keep your responses to 3 minutes, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you. Hi, Mamadou.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning. Thank you for taking your time to be here with us. My question is, COVID-19 has created a public health and economic crisis for our country. and our Commonwealth. The pandemic has underscored how communities of color and low-income communities suffer disappropriate impacts of pollution and environmental injustice that are often concentrated in their neighborhoods. If you are reelected, what policies in that plan have you been working on to address these inequities, and which policy would you prioritize going forward?
That's a great question and great background, by the way. I've got to figure out how to do that. Well, let me start off, Mamadou, is saying that I appreciate your question, and it's a huge issue. And the pandemic has only exacerbated and really amplified the need for addressing the health disparities in minority communities. One of the things that we are trying to do in the HEROES Act and in the transportation bills that we just passed, the Surface Transportation Act, I actually got an amendment for Brockton especially. So for years, I've been getting zero emission buses. So these are basically hybrid electric buses for the Brockton area transit. I started that back in 2003. And so, but they're so expensive and there were so few buses available that the 50 states, we all fight each other to try to get as many buses as we can. But I've worked to get more than our share in Brockton. But this year, we put in an amendment in the Surface Transportation Bill to put $1.7 billion into that. It's called Green Buses for All Cities program. That was my amendment. So the green buses for all communities, for all cities actually, is my amendment. It was accepted into the Transportation Act that was passed 2 weeks ago. So that will increase the pool of resources that we all have. We won't be fighting over a few hundred buses. Now we will have tens of thousands with the 1.7 billion. And so as a member of the Transportation Committee and as the prime sponsor, so I made sure that a large portion of that 1.7 billion goes towards communities that have communities of color and low-income communities that have a greater incidence of health disparity. So that will help. That will help all urban areas. But it was sort of, I was thinking of Brockton when I drafted that amendment, and it received great support from the Congressional Black Caucus and the Latino Caucus. So I'm very proud of that fact. That's probably 3 minutes. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mamadou, and thank you, Congressman. David DeBrand, a Milton resident and president of the Friends of the Blue Hills, will ask the next question.
I did.
Hey, Congressman Lynch, thank you for your time today. My name is David Dobrin, 20-year Milton resident, 8th District, and I'm president of the board for Friends of the Blue Hills. And my question is around open space. What will you do to help towns save unprotected but critical natural areas that can be under threat of development? For example, in Stoughton, there's a 24-acre woodland parcel surrounded on 3 sides by conservation land that is currently under threat for development. So what are your key accomplishments in protecting open space from development, and what policies would you prioritize if you're reelected?
Okay, so this is similar to a lot of the problems that we've had in Walpole. We had some old 21E sites, and I work very closely with the state legislature. So when I was in the state legislature, I was a big open space guy. When I was in the House and Senate, we did a lot, in Milton and in Randolph at the time. I remember going out there with Governor Wells, if you can believe it, to announce, some of the big tracts of land that we reclaimed for open space. But what we did in Walpole was, it started out as a local initiative. There were some old factories there that had polluted a huge tract of land there. What I did and what I'll continue to do is used my leverage with the EPA. We got them to come in. Because of the development of housing, you had a lot of people now that were situated around this huge 21E site that actually had a groundwater issue that leaked into a nearby stream. And so we went in, put hundreds of millions into that site and repurposed it. So a little part of it we put on, we put the public service, like the fire department and the police, so a public safety building. And another part of the parcel, sort of to justify all of the costs there, we actually put a senior center on one corner of it. But it opened up a huge swath of land that was also threatening the groundwater and a wider area. No telling what the long-term impacts might have been if residential housing continued to grow in that area. So we've been, look, I'm an original co-sponsor of the new Green Deal. I've also got a bill that's going to have a huge impact that was just accepted today into the NDAA, which it's called the Climate Change National Security Act, and it requires every single government agency from State Department to DOD, Defense Department, in their budgets to include climate change resiliency and climate change reduction and zero emission goals as part of their budget. So over the next 10 years, that will bring tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars from the government, even from DOD, to provide climate change response within their budgets. So President Obama actually adopted that. When we proposed that last time, President Obama saw the bill and recognized the value of it. And he instituted, we couldn't get it through the Senate back then, so he instituted it by executive order. But unfortunately, when President Trump came in, and he reversed that. He eliminated that executive order. So we're back at it again. We need to get this incorporated. By having it as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a bill that absolutely has to pass, I believe we can get the president to sign back onto that.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks, Dave. Steve Olenoff, a Westwood resident, will ask the last prepared question.
Hi, I'm Steve Olenoff from Westwood. I'm a
Hi, Steve.
longtime public transportation advocate. Massachusetts has been a national leader in environmental policy, but we need representation in Congress that really fights to build a thriving, green, and equitable Commonwealth. This includes investing in affordable, accessible, and green public transportation. So what policies and projects have you promoted to make sure there is equitable access to and funding for clean transportation, such as electrification of our regional rail, the Red Line Blue Line connector, and the North-South Rail Link?
Okay, so we just did the Surface Transportation Act, 1.5 trillion, and it is loaded with green technology initiatives from top to bottom. I know where our time is limited, but I would just suggest one of the great groups that works with us on a daily basis. They are relentless down here. So I know we have local Massachusetts-based environmental advocacy groups, but we also have a couple of really strong national ones. One is the League of Conservation Voters. They are relentless. They are at my door every single time there is an issue that affects the environment, even tangentially. And they give an environmental scorecard to every single member of Congress and member of the Senate. So I know they've got me at 97% voting record on environmental issues on their scorecard. I also have a great record with Sierra, although the League of Conservation Voters is much wider and so they look at transportation, they look at energy, they look at others, whereas Sierra is a little bit more narrow. But I would trust the assessment, and I encourage you, go to their websites and look at my environmental scorecard. I'm proud to have a 97% voting record with them. My lifetime, so that's this session, but my lifetime is 95%. Ed Markey's is 95%. He's got a longer lifetime than I do and a longer record in Congress. And I'm not saying that, I'm in Ed's league, but we vote the same. you know, he's been a tremendous champion of environmental causes, and because of his seniority, he's been able to take the initiative on a lot of that. But I would advise that. The other thing I would say is that we have worked very close. I've been very happy with the way Governor Baker and Secretary Pollack have responded. They've been down here several times working with me on, you know, I just need to know what the initiatives are that my state legislature and the governor want, and also New England, because I'm one of only two. The other is Mr. Pappas from New Hampshire, but I have the responsibility of representing the New England states on the committee as a senior member. So, you know, we've put a lot into it in terms of these last two bills. The WERDA bill really addresses some of the, you know, we've got a resiliency problem in the greater Boston area. So one of my other amendments requires the Army Corps of Engineers to do an assessment with us and prioritize those projects, and they could affect surface rail. You know, in some cases we may have to raise the rail bed. In other cases we may have to, you know, raise bridges or take major infrastructure steps in order to make sure that our infrastructure is protected, because climate change is coming. And, you know, again, my bill on the national security, climate change national security bill will require every single agency in the U.S. government, federal government, to include that as a priority in their budget. And that's been supported by Jim Mattis, who was the chief of the general, the general chiefs, you know, the military. It's also been supported by Dan Coates, who was the director of the Office of National Intelligence. So this isn't just a democratic idea. This is a solid all of government idea.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Thank you, Steve. We will now ask questions that were submitted today. Again, please try and keep your responses to 3 minutes. And again, viewers, as a reminder, you can submit your questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom, and you can like or upvote the questions you would like to hear. Our first question, many people have submitted this first question, and I know you briefly mentioned this already, but please tell us if you support the Green New Deal, and are there aspects you would improve upon or change?
Sure, I'll try to be quick on this. So I'm an original co-sponsor. So when the group of us were originally asked to review it, I was an original co-sponsor. So I wasn't a follower. I was right up front. So I supported it. It is aspirational in object, right? So if the new Green Deal passes, it doesn't require the government to do anything. It's just it's a sense of Congress resolution. So it's merely a statement of where we want to be. But I would argue that my climate change national security bill actually requires all of those government agencies and departments, so Defense Department, State Department, Transportation Department, to include in their budgets, which is, you know, trillions of dollars over the next 10 years, make sure that climate change is an issue for them and that they respond to it in their budget. So it holds them accountable. And, you know, I mean, if we end up with President Biden, this could be a game changer for all of us. So I forcefully and enthusiastically support the idea of that are reflected in the Green New Deal, but we need to do more. I'll end it there. Thanks.
Thank you. Our second question comes from Faye Striegler. We know you have already spoken against the Weymouth compressor station. Thank you for doing that. Can you speak about what else you have already done to cut fossil fuels and increase the use of renewables?
Well, sure. One of the bills that I passed when I wasn't on the Transportation Committee yet, but one of the bills that I offered would have given a local review of that project on the part of the public safety officers in the Commonwealth. So think about this. I mean, it's present in both cases. You have one pipeline, high pressure pipeline, going through a blasting zone. And then in the other case, you've got the compressor station, which is proximate to a huge population of children and families. And so from even just putting on your public safety hat, terrible ideas. That pipeline that ran through the blasting quarry in West Roxbury is proximate to a lot of residential homes. So what I did was I tried to take a different tact, and I said, okay, first of all, the Natural Gas Act of 1935 has not been amended significantly since 1935. And the fuel and the coal and gas industry have had a lock on that. What I did, I was able to get a bill on the floor that would have provided an opportunity for the chief public safety official in each state to have a second review. So never mind what FERC does, but because oftentimes they're in the pocket of the natural gas industry. But it would allow, in our state, it would be the chief fire marshal for the state to review those projects above and beyond what FERC is doing and ask for a de novo review of all of the aspects of that project, so that it would give us a lot of leverage. In other words, it would give veto power to the chief public safety official in each state. So it got to the floor, but at that time, the Republicans ran the House. So it was Speaker Paul, I'm forgetting his name, but the Republican speaker killed the bill. So I was able to get the floor and argue it, but the bill failed on the floor. But I've got that refiled again, and hopefully, if we can get it to a point where we get it to the Senate and we have control of the Senate, we can get that bill passed.
Great, thank you. Our third question comes from Rachel Polliner.
Uh-oh, are we frozen?
I'm afraid you are frozen, but we can hear you. Oh, it looks like you're unfrozen. I think you're okay now. So our third question.
Sorry, you guys are all frozen.
No, you're okay. We can hear you. Can you hear us? All right, can you hear us?
Did you get that last answer?
Yes. Yes.
I can now.
Good.
Yeah.
You're good.
So when did I cut off? I'm sorry. I was on a roll there.
You never cut off. We could hear you the whole time. Your screen just froze for a little bit. So you're good.
Okay.
So I was on to our third question. It comes from Rachel Polliner. And can you speak about transportation issues, planes, trains, autos, mass transit, overall decision making?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would advise you to take a look at the Move America Forward Act. So that's the 1.5 trillion that we just passed. Overwhelming support among the environmental advocate groups for our bill. For the first time, really made a priority of addressing climate change, trying to get to zero emissions. Putting incentives, right? So if we want, because of the added costs, some of this newer technology has, we incentivize, the battery production and other technologies that will allow us to get off of oil and gas and get to a renewable transportation system and a renewable energy type system. So, we are just chock full of those. We took all the ideas that we could from folks like the League of Conservation Voters and clean transportation, green transportation groups, Sierra, to really try and influence all of that. We also addressed issues that were of a major concern. Just trying to get to 218 on this, we did address the broadband issue in some of our rural communities that we think had, especially during the pandemic, had a detrimental effect on a lot of those communities to continue to go forward. A lot of those kids in those areas couldn't continue with remote learning because of the lack of broadband. we also actually put in initiatives for housing, because housing, where it is located, there's more than 1 million African-American families that live within a half a mile of a natural gas facility in this country. Those poor areas have not had the political clout to push off on some of those projects. So, and the cost of available housing has been so high that unfortunately, a lot of the affordable housing in this country is located, next to some pretty harmful and in the midst of very harmful environments. So that's why the initiatives like mine for the green buses for every city initiative is very important, to try to inject the force of Congress in a way that puts our thumb on the scale on behalf of those communities that have disparate health impacts because of the environment. So it's a huge bill. It's being opposed right now in part by Senator McConnell, but we think that we have enough Republican support to get that done.
Thank you. Our last question comes from Robert Triest. What is your stand on pricing carbon emissions?
Well, I voted for the carbon tax back when we did it, I think in 2004 or 2005. I think that's a negotiation. Of course, we agree, I think in principle, that these externalities, allowing some companies to pollute, a broad swath of our environment, should come at a cost. We should, use the tax function to get revenue and take that and put it into green technologies to basically clean up those processes, but also to incentivize. You can discourage certain activities by the tax code, and I think we're at that point where we can. I think it's had an enormous effect already, in a way, on the coal industry. You've seen a lot of that move offshore, and a lot of it is threatened now as people have gone away from coal. It's disfavored now. A lot of that is tax policy and environmental policy, and I think we need to do more of it.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate your taking the time in this very crazy, busy schedule to talk to us. Do you want to take about 1.5 minutes to give a closing statement?
Sure. So we've got one more vote pending. I'm going to run in and vote. But look, again, so we do have groups down here that track our every move and every vote. And we can't replicate that, that oversight of 20 years of my record in a half-hour phone conversation or Zoom call. So I would just encourage you, unfortunately, the press seems to go for the flashy stuff, and I'm more of a workhorse than a show horse. So I would just encourage you to go to the League of Conservation Voters website, they go issue by issue on how my votes have been. I've been a champion for the environmental causes during my 20 years here in Congress. Like I say, I'm a workhorse, not a show horse. But we're at an incredible moment right now. I've been running at the problem, so I got onto the pipeline subcommittee so I can do work and get leverage with FERC and PIMSA and other environmental agencies. Other energy agencies there. I got on the aviation subcommittee so I can run at the problem and get leverage with the FAA, which has been traditionally one of the most non-responsive government agencies in the United States today, and that says a lot. So I hope you understand, and the reason I've been very active in West Roxbury and in Weymouth as well is that those are important issues to the people that I represent. So I've been very hands-on, not only on national issues, but when the environment is threatened at home, talk to the people in Walpole, talk to the people in Weymouth, talk to the people of West Roxbury in my district on issues that I've been on the ground with them on the lines, sometimes on the picket lines, but and sometimes in court with them.
Great.
I've been very active on this. So I ask for your consideration in the upcoming election, and I appreciate all the work that you're doing on environmental issues in our Commonwealth. Thank you.
Congressman Lynch, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate your taking the time, and we'll let you get back to your busy day. We are grateful to both candidates for coming today, Dr. Robbie Goldstein and Congressman Stephen Lynch. And I would also like to thank all of you for attending, participating, and wanting to understand the candidates' positions on environmental issues when you vote on September 1st. I'd also like to thank all of our co-sponsors again, particularly the Environmental League of Massachusetts staff who did all of the behind-the-scenes tech for this webinar. This webinar is being live streamed on the Environmental League of Massachusetts Facebook page, and all participants will be receiving a copy of the recorded video. I'd like to thank you all again for joining us.